The Takase boat. Ogai Mori. The Takase boat is a small boat that plies up and down the Takase River in Kyoto. During the Tokugawa period, when a criminal in Kyoto was sentenced to exile on a remote island, the authorities would summon the criminal's kin to the prison, where they were granted permission to bid their final farewell. Thereafter, the criminal would be placed aboard the Takase boat and sent down to Osaka. It was customary for a constable, under the jurisdiction of Kyoto, to escort the criminal, and among the criminal's relatives, it was tacitly permitted that one of notable standing might accompany the voyage as far as Osaka. This was not a matter formally sanctioned, but rather one overlooked, tolerated in silence. Those sentenced to exile in those days were, of course, judged guilty of grave offenses. Yet it was not the case that the majority were vicious men who killed and set fires in the pursuit of thievery. More often than not, the passengers of the Takase boat were those who, by a tragic lapse in judgment, had committed unforeseen crimes. A common example might be a man who, in the throes of a love-suicide pact, slew his lover, but survived himself. With such a soul aboard, the Takase boat would set off as the twilight bell tolled, gliding eastward past the dimly lit homes, lining the dusky streets of Kyoto, crossing the Kamo River, and continuing downstream. Within the boat, the criminal and his kin would spend the long night in quiet conversation, recounting the tale of their misfortune, words of regret that, however often repeated, could never undo what had passed. The constable, listening nearby, would gain a vivid understanding of the pitiable circumstances into which the criminal's family had been cast knowledge, far beyond what could be gleaned in the magistrate's court, from official depositions or written confessions on the office desk. Among the constables, there were those of differing temperaments. Some, cold and indifferent, would find such lamentations a nuisance and wish to shut their ears. Others, however, though their faces betrayed nothing, would take the sorrow deeply to heart and suffer in silence. When the criminal and his kin had fallen into particularly woeful straits, and the constable happened to be one of gentle spirit, easily moved to tears, he could scarce restrain himself from weeping in spite of his station. Thus, it came to be that among the constables of the town magistrate's office, the duty of escorting the Takase boat was widely loathed as an unpleasant task. When might it have been? Perhaps in the Kansei era, when Lord Matsudaira Sadanobu governed in Edo under the name of Shirakawa Rakuo. On a spring evening, when the cherry blossoms of Kyonin scattered in response to the tolling of the twilight bell, a most unusual criminal, such as had not been seen before, was placed aboard the Takase boat. His name was Kisuke, a man of about 30 years, with no fixed abode. Naturally, he had no kin who might be summoned to the prison for a farewell, and thus he boarded the Takase boat alone. The constable assigned to escort him, Haneda Shōbei, had been informed only that Kisuke was guilty of the crime of fratricide. Yet as he led the man from the prison to the landing, he observed Kisuke thin of frame, his complexion pale and bluish, with a demeanor that was both earnest and meek. He treated Shōbei with the utmost respect, as one should toward an officer of the law, and yielded without resistance in all things. Yet this submission did not bear the cloying air of false humility, so often affected by criminals who seek to curry favor with the powerful. Shōbei found it curious. Even after they boarded the Takase boat, he watched Kisuke not merely with the detached eye of an official performing his duty, but with keen and constant attention to his every movement. That evening, The wind died at dusk, and a veil of thin clouds spread across the sky, blurring the moon's outlines. The air bore the faint warmth of approaching summer, rising in mist from the soil of the riverbanks and the riverbed alike. As the Takase boat passed beyond the lower districts of the city and crossed the Kamo River, all around them fell silent, save for the soft murmur of water parting at the prow. Though it was permitted for a convict to sleep aboard the night boat, Kisuke made no move to lie down. Instead, he sat in silence, gazing upward at the moon, whose light waxed and waned with the shifting density of the clouds. His brow was serene, and his eyes held a faint glimmer. Shōbei, though not staring directly, never let his gaze stray far from Kisuke's face. Again and again, he murmured to himself, "Strange. How strange." For no matter from which angle he regarded the man, Kisuke's expression seemed almost joyful. So much so that, were he not constrained by the presence of an official, one might have expected him to break into a whistle or hum a carefree tune. Shōbei thought to himself, "How many times have I served as escort aboard this Takase boat? I know not. But the criminals I've accompanied have all looked much the same. Pitiful, wretched beyond words. And yet this man, what is the meaning of that face? He looks as though he were on a pleasure cruise. They say he killed his younger brother, and no matter how vile that brother might have been, no matter the circumstances, no man should feel at ease after such an act. Can this pale, gaunt fellow be such a monstrous soul, so devoid of human feeling, as to smile after murdering his own kin? No, that did not seem likely. Perhaps, he thought, the man is mad. But no, there was not a word or gesture that did not bear the ring of reason. What, then, is the truth of this man? The more Shōbei pondered it, the more inscrutable Kisuke's conduct became. After a time, Shōbei could no longer suppress his curiosity and called out, "Kisuke, what is it that occupies your thoughts?" "Yes, sir," Kisuke replied, glancing about as though fearful he had somehow drawn the constable's reproach. He straightened his posture and looked attentively toward Shōbei, as if to divine the officer's mood. Shōbei, feeling he must now explain the reason for his sudden question, and that his words were not in the capacity of a stern official, spoke thus. "No, there is no particular cause for my asking. The truth is, I've been wondering for some time what feelings you harbor toward your journey to the island. I've escorted many men on this boat, bound for exile, men of all kinds and stories. But each and every one of them was sorrowful, filled with lament, as they traveled spending the night in tears with the relative who came to see them off. Yet when I look upon you, it seems you bear no such grief. Tell me, what are your thoughts?" Kisuke smiled softly. "I thank you, sir, for your kindness in asking. Indeed, I can understand well why others would find the journey to the island a bitter fate. That feeling is not foreign to me, but such sorrow is for those who lived in comfort in the world. Kyoto, to be sure, is a splendid city, but I dare say there is no place upon the earth where I could have suffered as I did there. By the mercy of the authorities, my life has been spared, and I am to be sent to the island. Even if it is a harsh place, it cannot be the dwelling of demons. Until now, I have had no place in this world where I might rightly say I belong. Now, at last, the government has granted me such a place, that I may settle there that, above all else, is a blessing beyond measure. And though I appear weak of body, I have never once succumbed to illness. Whatever labor awaits me on the island, no matter how difficult, I do not believe it shall break me. And more than that, I have received 200 manmei in copper coin for the journey. I carry them with me here." As he said this, Kisuke placed a hand upon his chest. It was, in those days, customary that those sentenced to exile be granted 200 man to take with them. Kisuke continued his speech. "I must confess something rather shameful. Until now, I have never in my life held 200 mon of coin in my bosom as I do now. I would go about seeking work wherever I might find it, and once I found it, I worked without sparing my strength. But the money I earned, I had to pass it from one hand to another the moment I received it. If I was fortunate enough to be able to purchase food outright with cash, that was a good day. Most of the time, however, I had to repay what I'd borrowed, and then borrow again to get by. Now, in prison, I have done no labor, and yet I have been given food. Even this, I feel, is a burden I owe to the government's kindness. And now, as I was sent out from the prison, I received this 200 mon. So long as I continue to live upon the government's provisions, I need not spend it. For the first time in my life, I possess money of my own. I do not yet know what kind of work awaits me on the island, but I look forward to using this sum as the seed of my new labor." With that, Kisuke fell silent. Shōbei responded, "I see. Is that so?" But each word struck so far beyond his expectations that he could say no more for some time. He fell into silent reflection. Shōbei was approaching the age of early elderhood. He had already fathered 4 children with his wife, and his aged mother was still alive, making a household of 7. His life was one of frugality, so much so that others would call him stingy. He made no clothes except his official garments and a sleeping robe. Yet, by unfortunate circumstance, his wife had come from a wealthy merchant family. Though she was sincere in her intention to live within the means of his stipend of rice rations, the habits of one raised in comfort clung to her. She could never quite manage to tighten the purse strings in the manner her husband desired. Month after month, their accounts came up short. Then his wife, in secret, would bring money from her family to cover the deficit because Shōbei detested debt as one might a loathsome insect. But such matters could not remain hidden from him. Whenever the family received gifts from her relatives, say, for seasonal festivals or for the children's Shichi-go-san celebrations, Shōbei could not help but feel a pang of shame. That his wife had to patch the holes in their household finances made him displeased, even though it prevented real want. In this way, even in the otherwise peaceful Haneda household, discord would occasionally arise. Now, hearing Kisuke speak, Shōbei began to compare the man's lot with his own. Kisuke said that though he worked and earned wages, the money would pass from his hands as soon as he got it. A pitiful and sorrowful state, indeed. But then, when Shōbei turned his thoughts upon his own life, he wondered, was there truly such a great difference between them? He too merely passed along the rice stipend he received from above, from one hand to another. The difference between them, it seemed, was nothing more than a few columns on the abacus. Even the 200 manmei that Kisuke so cherished, Shōbei himself had no such savings to his name. Indeed, even accounting for the difference in scale, it was not unreasonable that Kisuke found joy in viewing those 200 manmei as a form of savings. That sentiment was something Shōbei could well understand. And yet, however one might adjust the reckoning of values, what struck him as truly wondrous was Kisuke's utter lack of avarice, his deep contentment with sufficiency. Kisuke had struggled to find work in the world. When he did find it, he labored tirelessly and was content simply to earn enough to keep his mouth fed. Thus, when he entered the prison and found that food so scarce in his past life was provided to him without labor, as if bestowed from the heavens, he was astonished. For the first time since birth, he had known the feeling of true contentment. Shōbei realized, no matter how he tried to adjust for scale, that here lay a vast gulf between Kisuke and himself. His own life, supported by the stipend of rice from his official post, managed, for the most part, to balance its accounts. Though shortages sometimes arose, it was a life lived at the very edge, and yet, within that life, he had never known satisfaction. He passed his days feeling neither particularly fortunate nor unfortunate, but deep within his heart, he harbored persistent unease. What would happen if I were suddenly dismissed from my post? What if I fell gravely ill? And when he discovered that his wife had, unbeknownst to him, covered their shortfalls with money from her family, that hidden anxiety would rise to the threshold of awareness, casting a long shadow. What, then, was the origin of this great divide between them? It would be easy to say, on the surface, that Kisuke had no family ties while Shōbei did, and thus their circumstances were different. But that, Shōbei knew, was a lie. Even if he himself were a bachelor, he could not imagine feeling as Kisuke did. The root of the difference lay deeper, in a place he could not yet name. A vague thought came to Shōbei, something about the nature of a human life. A man with illness longs to be rid of it. One without food longs only to eat. One without savings wishes for even the smallest nest egg, and when he has that, he wishes it were greater still. So it goes, onward and onward. When, then, does a man stop? Where is the place he plants his feet and says, "This is enough"? Now, before his very eyes, he saw such a man, Kisuke, who had found that place, who had stopped. Shōbei stared at Kisuke, with eyes wide in sudden wonder. At that moment, it seemed to him that a faint halo of light shone from Kisuke's head as he gazed up at the sky. Still gazing upon Kisuke's face, Shōbei once more addressed him. "Mr. Kisuke." This time, he added the honorific Mr., not with full awareness or deliberate choice, but as though the word had slipped unbidden from his lips. Yet no sooner had the sound reached his ears than he realized how improper it was to address a convict thus. And now, having spoken, the word could not be withdrawn. "Yes, sir," replied Kisuke, though a look of quiet puzzlement crossed his face, as if he too had found the form of address curious, and now studied Shōbei's expression with some unease. Shōbei, brushing aside the slight awkwardness, continued, "I've asked you many questions already, but it's said that you're being sent to the island for having taken a man's life. Would you, if you're willing, tell me the truth of what happened?" Kisuke, visibly humbled, bowed his head and said in a hushed voice, "Yes, sir, I shall tell you. I am deeply ashamed, for it was through a grave misunderstanding, an unspeakable act I committed in a moment of madness. Even now, when I reflect upon it, I cannot fathom how I was able to do such a thing. It was truly as though I had lost myself in a dream. When I was very young, both my parents were taken by an epidemic, leaving only my younger brother and me behind. In the beginning, the kind folks of the neighborhood took pity on us, as one might take pity on a stray pup born beneath the eaves. We earned our keep running errands and such, and though poor, we managed to survive without starving or freezing. As we grew older, we did our best to find work that allowed us to stay together, helping one another as we went along. Last autumn, both of us began working at a textile workshop in Nishijin, doing karabiki, pulling the loom without weaving. But soon after, my brother fell ill and could no longer work. At the time, we were living in something like a makeshift hut in the northern hills, crossing the Kamiagawa Bridge each day to reach the workshop. I would work until dusk, buy food on the way home, and return to find my brother waiting, always apologizing for leaving me to shoulder everything alone. One day, I returned as usual, thinking of nothing in particular, only to find my brother lying face down on his futon, the floor around him soaked in blood. I was stunned. I dropped the bamboo parcel I held and rushed to his side, crying, "What's happened? What's wrong?" He looked up at me, his face deathly pale, blood covering his cheeks and chin, but he could not speak. With each breath, a faint wheezing came from his wound. I couldn't make sense of it. "Did you cough up blood?" I asked, stepping closer. Then, using his right hand to push himself up slightly, he raised his body. His left hand remained clutched to his throat, and from between his fingers oozed clots of dark, thick blood. Then, finally, he found voice enough to speak. "Forgive me. Please, forgive me. It's a hopeless illness, and I wanted to die so that I could relieve you, even a little. I thought if I cut my throat, I would die quickly. But my breath only escapes from the wound. I tried to push the razor in deeper, with all my strength, but it slipped sideways. I don't think the blade broke. If you can pull it out cleanly, I believe I'll be able to die. Speaking is difficult. Please, help me pull it out." As he loosened his grip, more air escaped from the wound. I was so overwhelmed I couldn't speak a word. I looked closely at the injury. It seemed he had taken the razor in his right hand and tried to cut across his throat, but failed. Then, with the blade still in, he had tried to force it deeper, gouging it in. Only about 2 inches of the handle protruded from his neck. I could do nothing, only stare at his face. His eyes were fixed on me, pleading. "I'll fetch a doctor, just wait," I said at last. But he gave me a look full of pain and disappointment, then pressed his hand firmly once more to his neck. "A doctor won't help. I'm in agony. Pull it out, please." I was helpless, my mind reeling. His eyes spoke louder than words. "Hurry, hurry," their sorrow turning slowly to desperation, then to bitterness. At last, they were eyes filled with anger, like one glaring at an enemy. Seeing that, I thought, I must do as he says. I must. "Very well," I said. "I'll pull it out for you." The moment I said it, his expression changed completely clear, almost joyful. I braced myself on my knees, leaning forward. He released his right hand from the floor and lay on his side, propping himself with the elbow of his left arm. I grasped the razor's handle and pulled it out in one firm stroke. Just then, the front door bolted from within opened, and an old woman from the neighborhood entered. I had asked her to check in and give my brother medicine while I was away. It was already growing dark inside the hut, so I couldn't tell how much she saw, but she gave a cry, "Ah," left the door wide open, and ran off. I had tried to pull the razor quickly, cleanly, but even so, I felt a resistance, as if I'd torn through what had not yet been cut. The blade was facing outward, so I suppose I sliced further into that side. I stood there, still holding the razor, dazed. The old woman ran out, and I just watched. When I finally came to myself and looked at my brother, he was already gone. The blood from the wound had poured forth in great quantity. Then the village elders arrived, and I was taken to the authorities. Until that moment, I sat there with the razor beside me, gazing at my brother's lifeless face, his eyes still half open. Kisuke, who had been speaking with a slight downward tilt of the head, gazing up at Shōbei from beneath, let his words trail off and dropped his eyes to his knees. His account was perfectly coherent indeed, perhaps too coherent. That was because, over the past half year, he had turned those events over in his mind countless times, and because, each time he was questioned at the local office or interrogated at the town magistrate's court, he had been made to recount the story with ever-increasing precision and care. Shōbei, listening, felt as though he had witnessed the entire scene unfold before his very eyes. Yet from the moment he had heard only half the tale, a doubt had begun to stir within him. Is this truly the murder of a brother? Is this what it means to take a life? And even after hearing it all, he could not dispel that doubt. The brother had begged him, "If you pull out the razor, I will be able to die." And Kisuke had done so, and his brother had died. Thus, it might be said he had killed. And yet, the brother, it seemed, was already beyond saving. His plea to die quickly came from his inability to endure the pain. Kisuke, seeing that agony, could not bear it. He had acted to release him from that suffering. Was that a crime? Yes, it was the taking of a life. Of that, there could be no doubt. But if it had been done out of mercy, to spare another from torment, then a shadow of uncertainty arose, one which could not be dispelled, no matter how he turned it in his mind. After much reflection, Shōbei's heart arrived at this thought. In the end, it is not for me to judge. I must leave it to those above me. He resolved to accept the decision of the magistrate as his own. And yet, even as he did so, something still felt unresolved within him. He could not help but long to ask the magistrate himself, was this truly a crime? In the deepening haze of night, the Takase boat, bearing its two silent passengers, glided across the black surface of the water.